The Zodiac Killer, also translated as the Zodiac Murderer or the Zodiac, was a serial murderer active in Northern California during the late 1960s. This mysterious killer claimed to have committed 37 murders, but verified police investigations confirmed that between December 1968 and October 1969, he shot 7 people, killing 5. Following each crime, the Zodiac Killer would send a series of taunting letters to law enforcement and the media. The letters were primarily designed to boast about his crimes. Additionally, the Zodiac Killer would include a zodiac symbol at the end of each correspondence, and these letters contained 4 ciphers or coded messages. The Zodiac Killer claimed that if the police could decipher these codes, they would learn his true identity. However, to this day, there are still 3 codes that the police have not been able to crack. The Zodiac Killer case remains unsolved and has become one of the biggest murder mysteries in American history. 1. The series of murders that took place 40 years ago, on December 20, 1968. A motorcyclist was passing by the famous Lover's Point in Vallejo, California. On a dimly lit road, he found a young couple barely alive lying next to their car riddled with bullet holes. Later, the police investigation confirmed that the 2 individuals were 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 17-year-old David Arthur Faraday, who were on their first date at the time, planning to attend a Christmas concert at Hogan High School. At around 10:15 p.m., Faraday parked his mother's car in a graveled turnout on Lake Herman Road. After 11 p.m., another car pulled into the turnout and stopped next to the couple. The driver of this car got out with a gun and ordered Faraday and Jensen to get out of their vehicle as well. Jensen got out first, and as Faraday was exiting the car, the killer shot him in the head. As Jensen tried to run away, she was hit with 5 shots in the back. A few minutes later, the 2 young people were discovered by Stella Borjas, a resident living nearby. She immediately reported to the local police, but their investigation yielded no clear leads. Faraday was still breathing when found, but unfortunately died on the way to the hospital. On the midnight of July 4, 1969, just 4 kilometers away from the Lake Herman Road murder site, another homicide occurred at a golf course. Delano, Farrell, and Michael Maggie Mago drove to the Blue Rock Springs golf course in Vallejo, California. After they arrived and stopped their car, both were still sitting inside Farrell's vehicle when another car approached and parked nearby. The passing car immediately left but returned about 10 minutes later, this time parking behind the couple's car. The driver of the strange car got out, approaching the passenger side of Farrell's vehicle with a flashlight and a 9mm pistol. The assailant first blinded the victims with the flashlight's intense beam and then fired several shots at both victims. Thinking it was over, the killer returned to his car. However, the nightmare wasn't finished. Upon hearing Mago's groans from the pain, the murderer calmly walked back to the car door and fired additional shots into both victims before driving away. Farrell died from her injuries at the hospital while Mago survived. Around 12:45 p.m. on July 5, 1969, a man called the Vallejo Police Department to report a double murder, claiming responsibility for the attack. He also confessed to the murders of Faraday and Jensen 6.5 months earlier. The caller's voice was low and monotonous, as if reading from a prepared script. "I want to report a double murder. If you go east a mile to Columbus Parkway, you will find some kids in a brown car. They were killed with a 9mm Luger. I also killed 2 kids last year. Goodbye." The police traced the call and found that the killer had made the call from a phone booth on the street, located next to a gas station at the intersection of Tuolumne Street and the Tuolumne River, just 0.3 miles from the victim Farrell's home, and only a few blocks from the Vallejo Police Department. 26 days after the incident, on August 1, 1969, the Zodiac Killer sent a letter to the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Examiner, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Bulletin, claiming responsibility for the shootings at Lake Herman and Blue Rock Springs. The content of the letters was essentially the same, with about 1/3 of each letter consisting of a 408-symbol cipher, claiming that his identity was encoded in the text. The Zodiac Killer demanded that the media print these letters on the front page of each newspaper, or he would wander around on weekend nights killing solitary people, killing one after another until he had killed 12 people. The Chronicle published about one-third of the cipher from the Zodiac Killer's letter on the fourth page of the next day's newspaper. At the same time, the words of Vallejo Police Chief Jack Stilts were quoted at the bottom of the article. "We are not sure that this letter was written by the murderer." The Chronicle asked the sender to write a second letter to provide more facts to prove his identity. However, the Zodiac Killer did not respond, and of course his plan to continue killing was not carried out. On August 7, 1969, the San Francisco Examiner received another letter that began with a salutation. "Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." This was the first time the killer used this name when referring to himself. The letter was a response to Vallejo Police Chief Stilts's request for more details to prove that he had killed Faraday, Jensen, and Farrell. In it, the Zodiac Killer provided all the details of the murders, including parts that the police had not released to the public. The killer also sent a message to the police. Once the police cracked his code, then they could catch him. On August 8, 1969, Donald and Betty Hardin of Salinas, California, cracked the 408-symbol cipher, but no specific name appeared in the translation. The decoded message did not reveal the killer's identity, but provided a chilling insight into his mental state. He said, "I like killing because it is so much fun, more thrilling than hunting game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. The most enjoyable part is the killing, which is much more satisfying than another kind of release I could mention. The best part is that after I die, I will be reborn in paradise and the victims will become my slaves. I will not tell you my name, or you will try to stop me from collecting slaves for the afterlife." On September 27, 1969, 20-year-old Brian Hartnell and 22-year-old Cecilia Shepard, two college students, were picnicking on a small island with a beach at Twin Oak Ridge connected to Lake Berryessa. A man wearing a black executioner-style hood with sunglasses covering the eye holes, dressed in coveralls, and with a white 3-inch by 3-inch cross-circle symbol on his chest, approached the students with a gun. The masked man claimed to be an escaped convict from a Montana prison, where he had killed a guard and stolen a car. The masked man told the students that he needed their car and money to get to Mexico. He had brought pre-cut plastic cords and had Shepard tie up Hartnell, then he tied up Shepard. The masked man checked Hartnell's bindings and, finding Shepard's knots too loose, tightened them. Hartnell initially thought it was just a strange robbery, but the masked man began stabbing the two students. Then he walked 500 yards back to Knoxville Road, drew the cross-circle symbol on the door of Hartnell's car with a black felt-tip pen, with the cross's arms extending beyond the circle, and wrote the following text and numbers. Vallejo, the 20th of December 68, 6974, the 27th of September 1969, -6 to 30, by knife. A man and his son, fishing in a cove near the island, heard the victim's screams and calls for help, and immediately contacted the park management for assistance. At that time, both victims were still alive, but medical help didn't arrive for an hour. Shepard fell into a coma on the way to the hospital and never regained consciousness. She died 2 days later. Hartnell survived, fortunate enough to recount his experience to the media. Ken Nara, a deputy sheriff from the Napa County Sheriff's Office, was assigned to investigate the case and worked on it until his retirement from the police department in 1987. Later, the police traced the call from the anonymous caller to a phone booth just a few blocks from the police station and only 27 miles from the crime scene. Officers retrieved a still damp fingerprint from the phone receiver but were unable to match it to any suspect. For reasons unknown, after driving out of Cherry Street for 1 block, the man shot the officer in the head with a 9mm pistol, killing him instantly, then took his wallet and car keys and tore off a piece of his clothing. The killer was seen by 3 passing teenagers who immediately called the police. They saw the man wipe down the car for evidence and then head towards a block north of the Presidio district. A few minutes later, the police arrived at the crime scene, and the teenage witnesses claimed that the killer was likely still nearby. Officer Dan Fox, who was 2 blocks away from the scene and also received the alert, noticed a white man walking along the sidewalk and up the steps to the front yard of a house on the north side of the street. This encounter lasted only about 5 to 10 seconds, and his partner, Eric Zem, did not see this man. Because the emergency dispatch over the radio had only mentioned looking for a black suspect, not a white one, the officers did not speak to the man. Thus, they passed by the man unknowingly. When the officers arrived at Cherry Street, Officer Fox realized they were actually looking for a white suspect. Fox believed the Zodiac Killer had escaped along his original route to the Presidio Heights. By the time they got there to look for him, the killer had vanished. The 3 teenage witnesses helped the police's sketch artist compile a composite of the man who killed the taxi driver Stein. The killer was estimated to be a white male, aged between 35 and 45. Agents Bill Armstrong and David Toschi were assigned to investigate the case. The San Francisco Police Department investigated over 2,500 suspects over several years. On October 14, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter from the Zodiac Killer. The envelope contained a blood-stained piece of the shirt Stein was wearing when he was shot. The killer claimed that the police did not catch him because they did not conduct a proper search of the area. In the letter, the self-proclaimed Zodiac Killer stated that his next target would be schoolchildren. In November 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle received 2 more letters from the Zodiac Killer. The first letter was a cipher composed of 340 characters. The second letter spanned 7 pages and included a piece of Stein's shirt. In the letter, he claimed that the police had stopped him and had a 3-minute conversation with him. He also hints that he would become a killing machine, threatening to bomb large facilities such as buses. When Bailey appeared on television, a man called in during the broadcast, claiming his real name was Sam and asking Bailey to meet him in Daly City. Bailey agreed, but the man never showed up. Later, it was determined that this was a crank call, and the impersonator was a psychiatric patient at the Napa State Hospital. In December of the same year, defense attorney Bailey received a Christmas card and a piece of Stein's shirt. In the card, he asked Bailey for help and concluded with, "Please help me, I can't hold back for long." Bailey tried to contact him but received no response. Some speculated that he wanted to clear the facts, while others thought it was another hoax. More letters contained threats, bomb diagrams, and coded messages. The Zodiac Killer also announced that he intended to change the way he collected afterlife slaves, and his crimes included routine robbery, angry murder, and a few fake accidents. The killer's letters also included lengthy and aimless descriptions of his imagined tortures, with some paragraphs also including music by Gilbert and Sullivan. At the same time, he constantly mocked the police's detective abilities. "The police will never catch me because I am too smart." The Zodiac Killer also demanded that people in the Bay Area wear the cross-circle Zodiac button he chose. When the public did not follow his wishes, he shot a person sitting in a car to punish them. News reports also linked the Zodiac Killer to many other unsolved cases, including in March 1970, when a kidnapped young woman told the police that she had once ridden in a car with a mysterious stranger similar to the Zodiac Killer. When the man threatened her life, she jumped out of his car and ran away. The Zodiac Killer later claimed in a letter that he was involved in an abduction case but failed. On April 20, 1970, the Zodiac Killer sent another letter to the San Francisco Chronicle. The letter included a 13-character cipher stating his plan to bomb a school bus with bombs, and stated that the case of blowing up a police station in San Francisco on February 18, 1970, was not related to him. He concluded the letter with a score of FPD equals 0. Later, the police interpreted this code as the number of people the Zodiac Killer had killed. In the summer of 1971, the Zodiac Killer seemed to disappear. However, those who liked him brought his image to the screen. The classic action movie Dirty Harry, starring Clint Eastwood, was very popular. This film was shot in San Francisco, and the story's protagonist, Detective Harry Callahan, is a character adapted from a detective assigned to handle the Zodiac case. Callahan tracked a villain named Scorpio, who was similar to the Zodiac Killer, hijacked a school bus and had a fierce gunfight with Eastwood. The Hollywood version provided the audience with answers that reality could not give. In the spring of 1974, the Zodiac Killer wrote a series of letters as a social critic. He expressed his shock at the promotion of murder in a movie called The Wasteland, which depicted a couple's fanaticism for bloody crimes. In another letter, he demanded that a columnist's section be stopped because the writer suffered from a severe mental disorder. In his final letter, he reviewed the movie The Exorcist, considering it the best comedy he had ever seen. Afterward, the Zodiac Killer disappeared once again. The Zodiac murders gradually became a legend locally, with the killer's specter turning into a pop culture phenomenon of modern serial killings in the late 1970s. This also led to a variety of murders and brought huge profits to the crime-romanticizing book market. Many people have proposed countless answers to the Zodiac murder case, but most of them are pure imagination without a factual basis. 10 years after the brutal Lake Herman case, Robert Graysmith, a cartoonist employed by the San Francisco Chronicle, began writing a book about the Zodiac Killer. After consulting with the famous police officer in charge of the investigation in San Francisco, Graysmith began to develop his own theories about the case and the suspect. Graysmith's book, published in 1986, caused a sensation, and the extensive media coverage completely changed the public's understanding of the case and the investigation of the Zodiac Killer. The book, titled Zodiac, is like a movie script, describing the author's beloved detective process and revealing secrets to investigators. The cartoonist claimed to have cracked the Zodiac code, proving that the killer used a projector to cover up his handwriting and used astrological symbols in the crimes. In April 2004, the San Francisco Police Department made a surprising announcement. San Francisco police officer John Hennessy said, "Shelve this case. Given the large number of pending cases and workload, we need to use our resources most effectively." Then, before March 2007, the police announced that the case would be reopened. Currently, the case is still under open investigation. After nearly 40 years of silence, in September 2008, Californian man Dennis Kaufman suddenly revealed to the FBI that while sorting through the belongings his stepfather Jack left in a public storage box, he unexpectedly found multiple pieces of compelling evidence proving that his stepfather Jack was the Zodiac Killer. On September 2, 2008, the FBI announced that it would conduct a comprehensive investigation of the evidence provided by Dennis, and this major unsolved murder case in American history might finally be solved. It is reported that Dennis Kaufman lives in Pollock Pines, California. Dennis said that when he was 5 years old, Jack Terrence became his stepfather, who passed away in 2006. Dennis found that the belongings Jack left in that storage box included many notes in his own handwriting, which were almost identical to the handwriting of the Zodiac Killer. Moreover, Jack even collected many photos that were obviously of dead bodies, as well as a bloodstained dagger. In addition, Jack left an audio tape in which he admitted that he was the Zodiac Killer. Most surprisingly, all of Jack's belongings were wrapped in a black scarf with the famous Zodiac symbol on it. The investigation found that the Zodiac Killer was wearing such a scarf during an attack. Dennis said, "When I saw these items, my heart seemed to stop beating. I was terrified. The true identity of the Zodiac Killer was Jack Terrence. He was my stepfather." However, after the FBI got involved in the investigation, until today, the conclusion is still inconclusive. The Zodiac series of murders that happened more than 40 years ago have not yet been solved. People seem to gradually forget the case itself and become more legendary, even becoming a typical symbol of unsolved murder cases. The crime culture related to the Zodiac series of murders has gradually become popular. In the 1970s, after the case, movies, novels, comics, and music related to it gradually flooded the market. Movies and TV dramas with it as the background have been continuously brought to the screen. Even the director of Seven, David Fincher, brought it to the screen in 2007, becoming a popular movie of the year. This is an unsolved case where the perpetrator was never caught. Even if someone reported and confirmed the identity of the murderer, too much time has passed, and the victims' souls will never be consoled. The murderer has never been punished throughout his life. Such cases leave a deep sense of injustice and frustration, not only for the victims' families and friends, but also for the society that values the rule of law. The inability to bring closure to these cases can be a heavy burden on the conscience of the community and the law enforcement agencies involved. It also serves as a stark reminder of the importance of ongoing efforts to solve cold cases and the need for advancements in forensic science and investigative techniques to bring solace to those affected by such tragedies.